Hello friends, this video on breathing and exchange of gases part 13 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Now we will talk about another important concept, that is transport of gases. Okay, so now we understood how exchange of gases take place at the alveolar end and also at the tissues end. Now the question is how the blood is actually getting carried by the blood from the alveoli to the body tissues and again from the body tissues to the alveoli. The oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood, we just say that okay, it is getting carried along with the blood. But how is it getting carried along with the blood? What is there in the blood which is actually carrying these gases? So here in this topic we will discuss about that. Okay, so as soon as the word transport comes, what can we think of? We can think of carrying something from one place to another. So when we talk about transport of gases, we are talking about carrying gases from one place to another. Now as we know, here whenever we talk about gases, we are talking about two gases, that is carbon dioxide and oxygen. So we will talk about transport of oxygen and transport of carbon dioxide separately, that how they are getting, we know that they are getting carried by blood. For example, you want to travel from one place to another. Who carries you? Maybe a train. But how the train carries you? Right? So whether you drive the train or there are seats inside the train, you just get into the train and sit there, or how is it? Like how the train is actually carrying you. So that is what we have to see here in this topic. So now the question is, who carries the gases? Like what is there in the blood who actually carries these gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, and how? So before we understand how, we actually need to know who carries them. So first we will talk about transport of oxygen. Okay, so here you can looking at this picture. This picture is actually to show that how oxygen, how far it needs to be carried. It actually needs to be carried throughout the body. Like we inhaled oxygen, it reached the lungs. That happened by the process of breathing. Now once it reaches the lungs, it reached the alveoli, then exchange of gases occurred. So alveoli sent the oxygen to the blood capillaries. And so now it is in the blood. So now blood has to take that oxygenated blood has to reach different parts of the body. So what is there in that oxygenated blood? That is the simple question here. Now 97% of oxygen is carried by the RBCs in the blood. Now when I say blood, we all know that blood in itself has so many different components, like the red blood cells or RBCs, the white blood cells, the blood plasma, right, and the platelets. So these are all the various components of blood. So let us see which component of blood actually helps in transporting oxygen. So 97% of oxygen is carried by RBCs. Okay, so RBC does most of the thing. However, around 3% of the remaining 3% is carried in the form of dissolved in plasma. So they are like, plasma is what? The watery thing, the fluid-like structure. That component is plasma. So only 3% is carried in the plasma. Rest 97% is carried by the red blood cells. So now the question is, what special is there in the red blood cells that help to carry oxygen? So now transport of oxygen by RBCs in the blood. So we will try to understand who carries it and how. Now oxygen is transported by hemoglobin, which is a pigment present in the RBCs. So hemoglobin is the hero here. So he is the one who is going to carry the oxygen. What is hemoglobin? Now hemoglobin is nothing but a protein. So hemoglobin is a protein structure. This is how the structure of hemoglobin looks like. So it is an iron containing protein structure. So as you know, protein structures are always complex. So here this is also hemoglobin with iron, which contains iron. Now where are the iron present? The hemoglobin is composed of 4 subunits, each with a heme group and a global chain. So what are the 4 subunits? So here you can see the green colored structure 1, 2, 3, and 4. So these are the 4 subunits and all of them have iron in them. So that is the speciality of hemoglobin. Now the question is how hemoglobin carries oxygen. Now oxygen gets bind to the iron which is present in this subunits. So each of these subunits has iron, right? And oxygen binds with this iron. Now oxygen binds with hemoglobin to form a compound called oxyhemoglobin. Now this is interesting. So oxygen will combine with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin, and this is a reversible process. That is, oxyhemoglobin can again dissociate to form oxygen and hemoglobin. Now hemoglobin is abbreviated as HB. So this formation and dissociation of oxyhemoglobin actually helps in the transport of oxygen. I'll tell you how. Now here you can, by looking at this structure, you can see that each hemoglobin can at the max carry 4 oxygen molecules. That's because each oxygen molecule will get binded to each subunit, and there are only 4 subunits in one molecule of hemoglobin. So one molecule of hemoglobin at the max can carry 4 molecules of oxygen. Right? Okay. Now, it has been found that the blood of a normal adult human being contains 6 different species of hemoglobin molecules. So, not all the hemoglobins are like exactly the same, but all of them have the same basic structure and function. So, the basic structure and function will remain the same, but they are not exact replica of each other. So now this is the concept that oxygen will combine with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin, and again oxyhemoglobin will get dissociated to form oxygen and hemoglobin. Now the question is where the formation will take place and where the dissociation will take place, and how that will help to carry oxygen from one place to another. So as I said, oxygen combines with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. Now let us see. What are the factors favorable for binding of oxygen with hemoglobin? Now as I said, the formation of oxyhemoglobin. What all supports the formation of oxyhemoglobin? Partial pressure of oxygen. Now the partial pressure of oxygen should be high. So wherever the partial pressure of oxygen is high, it will support the formation of oxyhemoglobin. That is, it will support the binding of oxygen with hemoglobin. Partial pressure of carbon dioxide should be low. So if partial pressure of carbon dioxide is low, then oxyhemoglobin will be formed. H plus ion concentration should again be low to support the formation of oxyhemoglobin, and temperature should also be low for the formation of oxyhemoglobin. So all these factors favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. So that means that the opposite conditions would favor the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin. Right? That means if the partial pressure of oxygen is low and if the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high, this will cause dissociation of oxyhemoglobin. Right? Please remember all these basic things, because once you understand these, only then you will be able to understand the exact transport process. So now we know that oxygen combines with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin, and formation of oxyhemoglobin and dissociation of oxyhemoglobin actually helps in the transport of oxygen. Now we have to see where formation occurs and where dissociation occurs. So now we also got these points, that what are the factors that cause formation and what are the factors that cause dissociation. So let us see the transport of oxygen from alveoli to body tissues. So let us see how the transport of oxygen happens from alveoli to the body tissues by formation and dissociation of oxyhemoglobin. So this is the overall process that takes place. Now if you look at the alveoli, what do you see? Partial pressure of oxygen is 104 and partial pressure of carbon dioxide is just 40, which is quite less when the partial as compared to the partial pressure of oxygen. So now when the partial, so here you can see that partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli is more, partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less. So when partial pressure of oxygen is more and carbon dioxide is less, this will favor the formation of oxyhemoglobin. That means oxygen will bind with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. So when oxyhemoglobin is formed, that means oxygen comes out, it gets into the blood and oxyhemoglobin is formed. Right? Now in the oxygenated blood, oxygen is basically carried in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Now it is carried as oxyhemoglobin, and when it reaches the tissues, what happened there? So if you look at the tissues, you see that the partial pressure of oxygen is 40. In the tissues, partial pressure of oxygen is 40 and partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 45. That means here partial pressure of oxygen is less and partial pressure of carbon dioxide is more. So what do these conditions do? They favor dissociation of oxyhemoglobin. Now what happens during dissociation of oxyhemoglobin? So when it reaches the tissues, the oxyhemoglobin gets dissociated to form oxygen and hemoglobin. Hemoglobin stays in the blood, but the oxygen is released into the tissues. And again, this hemoglobin, what will happen to this hemoglobin? The same hemoglobin will then be utilized to carry the carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide will combine with the same hemoglobin to form something else. So that is what we will discuss in the next section when we talk about the transport of carbon dioxide by hemoglobin. So now you understand, whenever the oxygen is released into the blood, it is carried in the form of oxyhemoglobin through the blood. When it reaches the tissues, it gets dissociated and oxygen is released into the tissues. So that is how oxygen is transported, and it is seen that for every 100 milliliter of oxygenated blood, almost 5 milliliter of oxygen is supplied or delivered to the tissues. So this is how oxygen is. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.